I gave 30 years to the throne, but I haven't given a single day to myself, or to the man who has stood in my shadow for decades. Now the crown is gone, the cottage is quiet, but a secret from Lyric's past is about to prove that even in retirement, a king's heart is never truly safe.
Welcome to another Bliss Tales video. Subscribe to my channel to keep these beautiful tales alive. New info, we have memberships and supers now where you can thank me and suggest new video ideas. Thanks for your support.
The throne room of Sylvaris had never felt colder than on the day King Veylan removed his crown for the final time. The weight of gold and duty lifted from his silver-streaked dark hair, and for the first time in 30 years, he breathed without the pressure of a kingdom pressing down on his chest. The assembled court watched in reverent silence as he placed the crown upon a velvet cushion and stepped back, relinquishing power to the council that would govern until the next generation was ready. His son, Prince Delorian, had made it clear he wished to spend years building Sylvaris alongside his husband Veylan before accepting the full burden of rulership. Veylan understood. He had carried that burden long enough to know it aged a man before his time. As the ceremony concluded and nobles began their whispered conversations about the future, Veylan's eyes found the one person who had been his constant through every trial, every loss, every triumph. Lyric stood at the edge of the gathered court, silver-white hair catching the light from the stained glass windows, storm-gray eyes fixed on Veylan with an intensity that made the former king's heart skip in a way it hadn't in decades. The wizard wore his ceremonial purple robes embroidered with constellations, but there was something different in his posture now. Attention. And anticipation. As if he too was waiting for something to begin. They had served together for 15 years. 15 years of careful distance, of professional exchanges, of hands that never quite touched when passing documents, of glances that lingered a fraction too long before propriety demanded they look away. 15 years of Veylan lying alone in the royal chambers, knowing that just 3 floors below, Lyric worked late into the night in his tower study, and wondering if the wizard ever thought of him the way he thought of the wizard. 15 years of wanting and denying, of duty before desire, of a love that grew in the spaces between words because it could never be spoken aloud. But now the crown was gone. Now there were no more protocols to follow, no more appearances to maintain, no more reasons to pretend that what existed between them was merely the professional respect of king and advisor. The cottage on the palace grounds had been prepared weeks in advance. It sat at the forest edge, close enough to remain under the palace guard's protection but far enough to offer the illusion of privacy and peace. Veylan had chosen it himself, walking the property with the head of security, noting the sight lines, the patrol routes, the wards that Lyric himself had reinforced. It was a modest dwelling by royal standards, with whitewashed walls, a thatched roof, herb gardens surrounding the entrance, and windows that looked out onto ancient oaks. Inside there was a main room with a large stone hearth, a kitchen that smelled of dried lavender and rosemary, 2 bedrooms, and a study lined with empty bookshelves waiting to be filled. Lyric arrived 3 days after the abdication, his belongings transported in a single trunk by palace servants who set it down and departed with quiet efficiency. Veylan watched from the cottage doorway as the wizard approached, no longer in ceremonial robes, but in simple clothing of deep blue, his silver hair tied back loosely, revealing the elegant lines of his neck and jaw. He looked younger somehow, or perhaps it was simply that Veylan had never seen him so unguarded. "Your Majesty," Lyric began, old habit pulling the title from his lips. "Just Veylan," the former king said softly. "There are no titles here. No throne. No crown. Just us." The wizard's gray eyes searched his face, and for a moment neither of them moved. Then Lyric nodded slowly, a small smile touching the corners of his mouth. "Just us. I'm not certain I know how to do that. Neither am I. We'll learn together." Those first weeks in the cottage were an exercise in beautiful, awkward rediscovery. They moved around each other like dancers learning a new choreography, hesitant and uncertain but deeply aware of every movement, every proximity, every accidental touch. Veylan discovered that Lyric took his tea with honey but no milk, that he hummed while organizing his books, that he preferred the study's west-facing window because the afternoon light was best for reading ancient texts. Lyric learned that Veylan rose before dawn out of decades of royal habit, that he had a surprisingly skilled hand with the herb garden, that he often stood at the cottage door in the evenings just watching the forest as if still processing his newfound freedom. They shared meals at a simple wooden table, conversations flowing more easily now that court protocol no longer dictated every word. Veylan told stories of his youth before the crown became all-consuming, of his wife who had been a dear friend even if romantic love had never quite bloomed between them, of his grief when she passed and how Lyric's quiet presence in those dark months had been the only thing that kept him from drowning in sorrow. Lyric spoke of his training in the eastern mountains, of discovering his affinity for protective and healing magics, of the awe he'd felt when first summoned to serve in the palace of Sylvaris, of how he'd admired King Veylan from the very beginning and that admiration had slowly transformed into something far more dangerous and profound. The palace guards maintained their perimeter, discreet but vigilant. Occasionally servants would arrive with supplies or messages from the council, but for the most part, Veylan and Lyric existed in a peaceful bubble removed from the complexities of court life. They walked the forest paths together, Lyric pointing out magical flora and explaining the ley lines that ran beneath the palace grounds. They worked side by side in the garden, Veylan's hands in the soil while Lyric encouraged growth with gentle applications of magic. They read together in the evenings, Veylan in his chair by the fire, Lyric on the sofa with books of magical theory, and sometimes their eyes would meet across the room and hold conversations happening in silence that neither was quite ready to speak aloud. It was on a night when autumn rain drummed against the cottage roof that everything finally shifted. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows across the walls. Veylan sat in his usual chair, but he wasn't reading. He was watching Lyric, who stood at the window looking out at the rain-soaked forest, one hand pressed against the glass, his profile illuminated by firelight and lightning. "Lyric," Veylan said, his voice rough with emotion he could no longer contain. "Come sit with me." The wizard turned, something flickering in his storm-gray eyes. He crossed the room slowly and settled onto the sofa nearest Veylan's chair, close enough now that the former king could see the subtle tension in his shoulders, the way his hands clasped together as if to keep from reaching out. "I need to tell you something," Veylan began, leaning forward, elbows on his knees. "Something I should have said years ago but couldn't. Wouldn't let myself. You don't have to. I do. Because if I don't say it now, I never will, and I've wasted enough time already." He drew a deep breath. "I stayed on the throne far longer than I should have. The council told me to step down 5 years ago. Thalorian was grown, capable, ready to learn. But I didn't. I held onto that crown with both hands even though it was crushing me, even though I was exhausted beyond measure, even though every day felt like drowning. Do you know why?" Lyric's expression was carefully neutral, but his hands tightened in his lap. "Why?" "Because stepping down meant leaving the palace. And leaving the palace meant leaving you. As long as I was king, I had an excuse to keep you near me. To see you every day. To hear your voice. To exist in your presence even if I could never have more than that. I convinced myself it was duty keeping me on that throne, but it wasn't. It was cowardice. I was terrified that if I gave up the crown, I'd lose the only justification I had for keeping you in my life." The confession hung in the air between them, raw and honest and terrifying. Lyric stared at him, and for a horrible moment Veylan thought he'd made a catastrophic mistake, that he'd misread everything, that the wizard would stand and leave and... "You fool," Lyric whispered, and then he was moving, closing the distance between them, dropping to his knees in front of Veylan's chair and taking the former king's weathered hands in his own. "You beautiful, stubborn fool. Do you think I didn't know? Do you think I couldn't feel it every time you looked at me? Every time your hand lingered just a moment too long when passing me a document? Every time you found an excuse to summon me to the throne room when any messenger could have delivered the information? Lyric, I stayed because of you too. I had offers from 3 other kingdoms. Higher positions. More prestige. More gold. But I stayed in Sylvaris. I stayed in that tower. I stayed working late into the night on protection wards and healing research because I knew you were just floors above me, and being near you, even when we couldn't be together, was better than being anywhere else in the world without you. Veylan's vision blurred with tears he'd held back for 15 years. His hands came up to cup Lyric's face, thumbs brushing across sharp cheekbones, silver-white hair falling forward as the wizard leaned into his touch. "I'm not your king anymore," Veylan said, his voice breaking. "I can't offer you a palace or power or... I don't want any of that. I never did. I want you. Just you. Exactly as you are. A man who gave 30 years to duty and finally chose himself. Chose us." When their lips met, it was like coming home after a lifetime of wandering. Gentle at first, almost hesitant, as if both men feared this was just another dream that would dissolve upon waking. But then Veylan's hands slid into Lyric's silver hair, and the wizard's arms wrapped around him, and the kiss deepened into something fierce and desperate and real. 15 years of longing poured into that contact, 15 years of denied desire and suppressed emotion finally given permission to exist. They moved to the sofa, unwilling to break apart, unwilling to lose the warmth and closeness they'd denied themselves for so long. Lyric settled against Veylan's chest, the former king's arms wrapped securely around him, and they stayed like that for hours, alternating between fevered kisses and soft conversation, learning the taste and texture of each other, mapping the landscape of this new intimacy. "Stay with me," Veylan murmured against Lyric's temple. "Not as my court wizard. Not as my advisor. Just as yourself. As the man I love. I'm not going anywhere," Lyric promised. "I'm exactly where I want to be." That night, they fell asleep tangled together on the sofa in front of the dying fire, and when Veylan woke at dawn, Lyric was still there, silver hair spread across his chest, breathing deep and even, real and solid in his. The days that followed were a revelation. They stopped maintaining separate bedrooms, Lyric's belongings migrating naturally into Veylan's space until the cottage truly became theirs rather than a dwelling they happened to share. They learned each other's bodies with the careful attention of men who understood the preciousness of what they'd found. Morning kisses over tea. Hands held during evening walks. The slide of skin against skin in the darkness, whispered confessions and gasped names, and the profound intimacy of two people finally allowed to love without restraint. But it was during the third week of their new life together that Veylan began to notice something was wrong. It started small. Lyric sleeping later than usual. A tremor in his hands when performing simple spells. A paleness to his skin that hadn't been there before. The wizard brushed off Veylan's concerns with assurances that he was simply adjusting to using less magic, that the cottage was farther from the palace's ley lines and he was recalibrating. But Veylan had spent 30 years reading people, understanding the weight of unspoken truths, and he knew his lover was hiding something. The discovery came accidentally. Veylan was searching Lyric's study for a book on medicinal herbs when a hidden drawer in the wizard's desk came loose, revealing a scroll sealed with wax bearing the crest of Queen Elara, his late wife. His heart hammering, Veylan broke the seal and unrolled the parchment, his eyes scanning the elegant script. It was a contract. A magical binding written in Elara's own hand and signed in both her blood and Lyric's. The terms were clear and devastating. In exchange for Lyric's eternal youth and enhanced magical abilities, his life force would be permanently tied to the royal bloodline of Sylvaris, sustained by the powerful ley lines that converged beneath the palace. As long as he served the crown, as long as he remained within the palace's magical field, he would neither age nor sicken. But the contract specified that the binding was to the queen's lineage, to the magic she carried, not to the throne itself. Veylan's hands shook as he read the final clause. Should the bound wizard choose to leave the palace grounds permanently, or should he sever his service to the crown's magic, the borrowed years will begin to reclaim what was given. The process cannot be reversed without the original contract maker's blood, and as I will not live forever, this binding is both gift and curse. Choose wisely who you love, Lyric, for that choice may cost you everything. The scroll fell from Veylan's nerveless fingers. Elara had bound Lyric 15 years ago, shortly after the wizard arrived at court. She must have seen his potential, his dedication, and wanted to ensure Sylvaris would have his service for generations. But she tied him to her own bloodline's magic, and when she died, that connection had weakened. Now, with Lyric living in the cottage, away from the concentrated ley lines, using minimal magic and no longer in active service to the crown, the binding was unraveling. He was dying. Giving back the healthy and perfect years he'd been gifted, and it was happening because he'd chosen love over duty, chosen Veylan over immortality. When Lyric returned from his walk in the forest, he found Veylan sitting at the study desk, the contract spread before him, tears streaming down his weathered face. "How long have you known?" Veylan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lyric went very still in the doorway, and the resignation in his expression was answer enough. "Since the second week we were here. When I woke up and felt the ache in my joints that I hadn't experienced since I was mortal." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you would have insisted I return to the palace immediately. You would have sacrificed your happiness, your freedom, your peace, all to save me. And I couldn't bear that. Veylan, I spent 15 years watching you suffer under the weight of the crown. I will not be the reason you put yourself back in that cage." Veylan stood abruptly, crossing the room in 3 strides and gripping Lyric's shoulders. "You're dying. The contract is killing you, and you were just going to let it happen. Let me watch you fade without even giving me a chance to." "To what?" "There's no solution. Elara is gone. Her blood, which was required to undo the binding, is gone with her. Even if we return to the palace, it would only slow the process, not stop it. I made my choice. I chose you. I chose a handful of mortal years with the man I love over an eternity of loneliness and duty. That's not a choice you get to make alone." Veylan's voice broke, and he pulled Lyric against him, holding the wizard so tightly it must have hurt. "I didn't wait 15 years to love you just to lose you now. There has to be another way. There has to be." They stood like that for a long time, Lyric's face buried in Veylan's shoulder, the former king's tears soaking into silver-white hair. When they finally pulled apart, Veylan's expression had shifted from devastated to determined. "We're going to fix this," he said firmly. "I don't care what it takes. You said Elara's blood was required to undo the binding. Her bloodline continues through Thalorian. Her magic runs in his veins. Veylan, even if that's true, the magic required to alter a blood contract is dangerous. It could kill him. I won't risk the prince's life for my own. Then we find another way. We research. We consult every magical scholar in the kingdom and beyond. He paused, a new thought crystallizing. What if we created a new binding? One that doesn't require palace magic or royal bloodlines?" Lyric's gray eyes widened. "A soul binding? Veylan, those are ancient magic. Dangerous. They require perfect synchronization between participants, and if anything goes wrong, then we make sure nothing goes wrong. Explain it to me. How does it work?" Over the following days, Lyric taught Veylan everything he knew about soul bindings. They were, he explained, the oldest form of magical partnership, predating written contracts and blood oaths. 2 souls, in perfect harmony and genuine love, could choose to bind themselves together, sharing life force, magic, and mortality. If one was magical and the other was not, the magic would flow between them, equalizing and stabilizing. If one was dying, the other's vitality could sustain them. But the requirements were absolute, complete honesty, absolute trust, and a love so profound that both parties would willingly die before betraying the other. Any hesitation, any doubt, and the binding would fail catastrophically, potentially killing both participants. "The magic will test us," Lyric explained as they sat together in the study, surrounded by ancient texts. "It will dig into our deepest fears, our hidden resentments, every moment of doubt or anger we've ever harbored toward each other. We'll have to face all of it and choose each other anyway. If there's any part of you that regrets loving me, any part that wishes you'd chosen differently, the binding will find it, and it will destroy us both. Veylan took Lyric's hands, looking directly into those storm-gray eyes. I have no regrets. Not one. Every choice I made that led me to you was the right choice. Every year I spent wanting you, every moment of longing, every second of restraint, all of it was worth it to be here now with you. I would do it all again. I would wait 100 years if it meant having you at the end. You say that now, but when the magic tests you, then it will find nothing but truth. Lyric, I love you. I have loved you for 15 years and I will love you for whatever time we have left, whether that's days or decades. If binding my soul to yours gives us more time together, then there is no question. We do it. They prepared for 3 days, cleansing themselves according to the ancient rituals, fasting from everything but water, meditating to clear their minds of all distractions. On the third night, when the moon was full and the stars aligned in the constellation pattern Lyric had been waiting for, they stood together in the cottage's main room. All furniture had been moved aside, and Lyric had drawn intricate symbols on the floor in chalk infused with crushed moonstone and his own blood. They undressed completely, standing naked and vulnerable in the circle's center, hands clasped between them. Lyric began the incantation in the old language, words of power that resonated in the very air around them. Magic began to swirl, gentle at first, like a breeze, and then stronger, pulling at their hair and skin, filling the space with silver-blue light. Once this begins, we cannot stop, Lyric said, his voice strained as the magic built. Whatever we see, whatever we experience, we have to hold on to each other. Do you understand? I understand. I'm ready. Lyric spoke the final words of the spell, and the world exploded into light and sensation. Veylan felt his consciousness pulled from his body, merging with Lyric's in a space that was neither physical nor entirely metaphysical. They existed as pure essence, two souls laid bare before each other and before the magic that would judge them. And then the testing began. He saw Lyric's memories as if they were his own. The wizard as a young man, barely 20, arriving at the palace filled with hope and ambition. His first glimpse of King Veylan, 15 years younger but already carrying grief in his eyes from his wife's recent death. The slow dawning of affection that grew into attraction that deepened into love. But also the loneliness. The nights Lyric spent alone in his tower, listening to the palace celebration floors above, knowing Veylan was surrounded by nobles and dignitaries, untouchable. The jealousy when courtiers flirted with the king. The quiet devastation of watching the man he loved grow older while Lyric remained frozen in eternal youth, the distance between them growing wider with each passing year, not in feelings but in time itself. He felt Lyric's fear. Fear that Veylan would realize he deserved someone better, someone younger, someone not bound by dangerous magic and deadly secrets. Fear that even now, even with the crown gone and no barriers between them, Veylan would wake up one day and regret choosing a relationship with such complications over the peaceful retirement he'd earned. Then the magic turned, and Lyric was experiencing Veylan's memories. The former king's perspective flooded through him. The first time Veylan had looked at his new court wizard and felt something beyond professional respect. The guilt that had accompanied that realization because Alara had been dead less than a year. The slow acceptance that what he felt for Lyric was real and profound and terrifying. The countless times Veylan had stood at his chamber window late at night, looking down at the light in Lyric's tower, composing and discarding a dozen excuses to visit, never quite brave enough to cross that line. Lyric felt Veylan's shame. Shame that he'd used his position as king to keep Lyric close when he had no right. Shame that he'd let 15 years pass without speaking the truth. Shame that even now, he was asking Lyric to risk everything in a dangerous ritual rather than simply accepting the wizard's choice to trade immortality for love. The magic pressed harder, digging deeper, searching for the doubts and resentments that would prove them unworthy. It showed them fights they hadn't had yet, potential futures where love soured into bitterness. It showed Veylan growing old and infirm while Lyric remained youthful and vibrant, resentment growing between them. It showed Lyric's magic failing, leaving him powerless and dependent, Veylan's love transforming into obligation and pity. But for every dark possibility the magic presented, both souls responded with the same unwavering truth: we choose each other anyway. The magic showed Veylan dying young, leaving Lyric alone again. Veylan's soul responded, then I will have had the privilege of loving him with every breath I took. The magic showed Lyric's power consuming him, transforming him into something inhuman and dangerous. Lyric's soul responded, then he will stand beside me and help me find my way back, because that is what love means. The testing intensified, became almost unbearable, pressure building as the magic sought any crack in their foundation, any weakness that would justify rejection. It showed them every harsh word they might ever speak to each other, every moment of thoughtlessness, every small betrayal that accumulates in any long relationship. And still they held firm, souls intertwined, responding as one. This is what it means to love someone completely. Not perfection, but choosing them despite imperfection. Not the absence of difficulty, but the commitment to face difficulty together. And finally, after what felt like hours but was likely only minutes, the magic accepted them. The pressure released all at once, and instead of pain there was warmth. Instead of testing there was union. Veylan felt Lyric's magic flowing into him, gentle and sustaining, while his own mortal vitality poured into Lyric, anchoring the wizard to the physical world without need of blood contracts or ley lines. They were balancing each other, equalizing, becoming something new that was neither purely magical nor purely mortal but a perfect synthesis of both. Their souls settled back into their bodies, still in the circle, still holding hands, but now connected by something far stronger than physical touch. Veylan could feel Lyric's heartbeat as if it were his own. Could sense his emotions, his thoughts, his presence even when his eyes were closed. And he knew Lyric felt the same, the bond running both directions, eternal and unbreakable. They collapsed together onto the floor, the symbols around them fading to ordinary chalk once more. Breathing hard, covered in sweat, but alive. Together. Bound. Is it done? Veylan managed to ask. Lyric laughed, the sound bright and wondering. Yes. I can feel it. The binding from Ilara is gone, severed completely. But this new one, Veylan, I can feel you. Everything you are. It's incredible. They lay there until they had strength to move, then made their way to the bedroom, crawling under the blankets and curling together, still processing what they'd experienced. When morning came, they discovered the full extent of the binding. The ache in Lyric's joints was gone. His magic, rather than draining him, now flowed easily, sustained by Veylan's life force in a perfect exchange. And Veylan, who had expected to feel weakened by sharing his vitality, instead felt stronger than he had in years, Lyric's magic reinforcing him, slowing his aging, healing old injuries and the accumulated damage of 4 decades of stress and responsibility. We're going to have a very long life together, Lyric said wonderingly, examining his steady hands. The binding doesn't make us immortal, but it extends our natural lifespans considerably. We could have 50 years. Maybe more. Veylan pulled him closer, pressing a kiss to his temple. Then I intend to spend every single one of those years showing you how much I love you. They spent the following weeks settling into a new rhythm, one shaped by their deepened bond. The soul binding had removed any remaining awkwardness or hesitation between them. They moved through the cottage in perfect synchronization, anticipating each other's needs before they were spoken. Their physical relationship deepened as well, intimacy now layered with the constant awareness of each other's presence and pleasure. When they made love, it wasn't just bodies joining but souls, magic sparking between them, pleasure magnified and shared until neither could tell where one ended and the other began. News of their binding reached the palace through the guards, and Thalorian and Veilric visited one afternoon, the young prince embracing his father with genuine joy while Veilric congratulated Lyric on finding a way to break the old contract. They shared a meal together, Thalorian and Veilric telling stories of their work rebuilding and strengthening Sylvaris, Veylan and Lyric simply enjoying the company and the confirmation that the kingdom was in good hands. "You both look happy," the Lorien observed as they prepared to depart. "Truly happy. I've never seen either of you this relaxed." "Retirement suits us," Veylan said, his arm around Lyric's waist, the casual affection natural and easy now. "As does honesty. As does love." After their guests left, Veylan and Lyric walked to their favorite spot in the forest, a small clearing where wildflowers grew and ancient trees provided shelter. They sat together on a fallen log, Lyric leaning against Veylan's shoulder, watching the late afternoon light filter through the canopy. "Do you have any regrets?" Lyric asked quietly. "About leaving the throne? About choosing this life?" Veylan considered the question seriously, then smiled. "Not one. For 30 years I gave everything to duty, to responsibility, to being what others needed me to be. I'm not sorry I did it. Sylvaris needed a strong king, and I hope I served well. But this? Us? This is what I should have chosen years ago. I regret the time we lost, but I refuse to waste another moment on regret when I could be living instead. I love you," Lyric said, the words still new enough to make both of them smile when they were spoken. "I will love you until my last breath and beyond. The binding ensures that our last breath will be the same breath, taken at the same moment, decades from now." "Good," Veylan said, turning to capture Lyric's lips in a slow, deep kiss. "I wouldn't want it any other way. When my time comes, I want you beside me. And until then, I want exactly this. Simple days. Peaceful nights. Your hand in mine. That's all I need. That's everything." They stayed in the clearing until the sun set, then walked back to the cottage hand in hand, the palace lights visible in the distance but no longer calling to them, no longer demanding anything they weren't freely willing to give. Inside their home, they built up the fire, shared a simple meal, and retired to bed early, making love slowly and tenderly, taking their time to explore and worship each other, magic sparking gently around them like starlight. And as they lay tangled together afterward, Lyric's head on Veylan's chest, the former king's fingers combing through silver-white hair, both men felt the profound peace of finally being exactly where they belong. No more longing. No more waiting. No more choosing duty over desire. Just two souls, bound together by magic and love and choice, beginning the next chapter of a story that would last the rest of their lives. The cottage stood quiet under the stars, protected by guards who understood that what existed within those walls was precious beyond measure. Not the love of a king and his wizard, but simply the love of two men who had waited far too long to claim their happiness, and would spend every remaining day celebrating that they finally had. Some love stories begin with grand gestures and dramatic declarations. Others unfold slowly over years of quiet longing and unspoken devotion. Veylan and Lyric's story was the latter, 15 years in the making, tested by duty and bound by soul magic, proving that sometimes the greatest act of courage is not fighting for a kingdom but choosing to fight for your own heart. And in their choosing, in their binding, in their commitment to build a life together free from the constraints that had kept them apart for so long, they wrote an ending that was really just the beginning of everything they'd always wanted but never dared to dream they could have. A retired king. A devoted wizard. A cottage at the forest edge. And love that would last until their final shared breath, 50 years or more into a future that belonged to them alone.
If you loved this video, show me some support by subscribing and clicking the notification bell.